George Belitsos, Executive Director, Youth and Shelter Services, and joining me today for a look at the items from the 1915 time capsule is Farwell Brown, our town historian, very dedicated to the history and educating all of us on the history of the city of Ames and Story County. We are surrounded on all four sides today, Farwell, by items that were removed from the time capsule on a very cold January day in 1996. I know you were there, along with our mayor and several of our city council members. And we had the Kathy Zveck there, who represented the Ames Historical Association.
I wanted to be sure I was under the cover. Ames Elementary Schools. There you are.
Can barely see Kathy. Half of her is in the hall.
See what we can do with it if it's not done.
Thorne, the historian and preservationist from Iowa State University, volunteered his time and talents to preserve the items that we're going to look at today. Farwell, any memories about that day when we uncovered the time capsule?
Well, I remember that it was cold. The building hadn't been heated for quite a while when we were in there.
4 years.
Yeah.
Finally has heat now.
Right. And somebody had made it accessible.
Right.
So we could look right down into that box that was behind the cornerstone.
It was a handmade box, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe it was, yes. And
were you surprised at how well preserved the items were when they came out?
I think I was. I think all but a very few of the items did come out in very good shape. In fact, they came out in as good shape as things that have been preserved in other ways, even in libraries.
It was a very fortunate that we did get the items out when we did, because little holes had developed in the box and moisture was getting in there. So we're very pleased that we were able to uncover the 1915 time capsule, and the people of Ames, who there were, I think our population was around 5,000 in 1915, really rallied together to come up with all of these items. Well over 100 items of real historical significance, some of which we're going to look at next.
These items reflect what was going on in 1915.
Yes.
Not only in Ames, but in the country and in the world.
Well, let's turn now to some of the items in the time capsule, and I think you can see, Farwell, this is the 1915 Ames phone book, and I think it's a one of a kind. And this was found in the time capsule in the 1915 Municipal Building. And tell us, where was the phone company in 1915?
Well, in 1915, the telephone office was on the second floor of the building on the northeast corner of Main Street and Kellogg. The building is still there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and there was the grocery store downstairs, and prior to 1915, the telephone office had been in different locations. The Ames telephone, the first telephone in Ames came in the 1880s. The first long-distance lines came into the college. And one of my grandfathers had the first residential long-distance line. He traveled to the Midwest, and I suppose that explained that. 1918, just 3 years later, they built the first telephone building on 5th Street. And the building is still part of the building. It's the telephone building today. In 1915, there were about 1,500 telephones in Ames.
Right. Wow. That's pretty good for a population of 5,000.
5,000, right.
And I guess they were very new devices for people.
But in those days, you know, people didn't have extension phones.
Right. Well, I notice it's only 3-digit phone numbers, and then see here where it says black and red. What does that mean?
Well, in the telephone office, they used cords that they pulled out and made the connections, and they were color-coded.
Okay.
And I think that's the distinction. So they had a system of red cords that they had to move around, and they had the black codes. And so I think that is the
It
explanation.
doesn't mean a party line or
No, I don't think
private
so.
line? No?
Of course, I wouldn't say for certainty that it wasn't a party line, but I think that, one of my uncles, his residential phone number was red 382, for example. I remember that.
Well, you know, here we are in the Browns.
Yeah.
And look at all the Browns here. Let's talk about some of these
Well,
people that
you
are
see-
in the 1915 phone book.
Yeah, you see that Harry F. Brown was my father. His middle name was Farwell. That's where I got it. He got it from his grandmother. Well, and K.W. Brown is in there somewhere. Right below that 444. That was a special number. They were all both on Kellogg, up there in the 1000 block on Kellogg. And if you look on, why don't you look on page 12 and look at that ad for the tailors advertising suits for $18.
A whole suit for $18. Boy, that's
let's find
a
out
deal.
where that is and make that call.
Well, you can't even buy a tie for $18.
Oh, right. Anyway, some of the ads are indicative like that, and the Munn ad, for example, you had that one a while ago.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah. Notice the phone number, telephone number 2.
Gee. Now, why did they just have two?
Well,
I guess does that mean they were the second ones to get a phone?
well, it would sort of indicate that. I don't know who had number 1, but the original exchange before there was a telephone office was in the office of the Tolton store. As a matter of fact, it was that small an operation, and that, of course, is back in the 1880s.
Look at this, Nelson Electric.
Yeah, and we still have some of these firms here.
Yes.
There's an example. Their phone number is 43.
So that must have been an early one too.
Right.
If you go by that.
And the Tilden store had 3 numbers for their 3 major departments.
Well, in fact, here's Tilden and Poole.
Yeah, that's another. That's a uncle of my mother's, a brother of my grandfather's, and later they combined their groceries. But their numbers were 15, 16, and 17.
Wow.
Grocery department was 15.
And you can remember that?
I can remember that. Yeah,
You didn't-
17.
Wow, you didn't just look that up. You
I didn't
actually
just look
remember
at it.
that
I
all
remember
those
that.
years?
Yeah,
From 1915.
I can remember that. And our phone at home was 122, and as a 5-year-old, I knew our number. I knew it.
Wow.
But that's not too hard, is it? To
No,
remember that?
no, not compared to today's
Yeah.
numbers. You got to.
Well, now, in those days, I started to talk about how many telephones, 1,500. I understand that today there's between 40 and 50,000 telephones in Ames, including the
40
campus.
to 50,000.
See,
Wow.
Every desk on campus, has got a phone
Right.
on it.
Wow.
And that's about 10 or 12,000 of them, I suppose. I don't have a
Now
figure.
is this the grocery store?
That's the Groves, that's the building, it was the upstairs of the Groves building,
On
where
the
the
corner
telephone office
of
was.
5th and Kellogg and Main Street.
And Main Street, right.
It is fun to look at these ads in the phone book. This is an early phone book, one of a kind.
That's
so it's
right.
very precious, and it's in great shape.
They have a lot of old phone books in the library, for example, but they don't have a 1915.
No, and here it will soon be there in the phone
Right.
book for the public to look through, and those those viewers who have had family in Ames for a long time can pull this out and look up
Right.
and see what their parents or grandparents or great-great-grandparents' phone numbers were.
Well, we've made a nice Xerox copy that will be bound there.
So that would make it easier to look
at
through.
it. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Oh, look, we had a taxi company.
Yeah, the Ames Taxi Cab Company, yeah.
Let's look up Pearson,
Okay.
because we're on the P's over here, and see there is Pearson.
R.A. Pearson, P.E. Where is it?
Pearson. See over, oh,
It's all right.
here we go. Sheldon. There, we're back to the P's. Okay, there's Pearson.
Go back to the next page. I think.
Okay.
going to be about halfway up. P-E-A-R-R-A Pearson.
Yes.
Residence, The Knoll.
Right.
Okay.
Iowa State University.
And
Well, we'll want the Jiskies to see this phone number.
Yeah.
Compare it to theirs today.
It's 365.
Wow. That was a commonly called phone number, I'll bet. I wonder how many phones there were on campus. Now, they didn't have black or white next to their phone number.
No, well, no. No, Pearson,
What
no.
that meant.
Well, a lot of them didn't have. I really don't know. Our phone number, 122, didn't have black or red either, see.
Oh, I see. I wonder what made the difference. Now, what was the Twin Star Theater?
Oh, the Twin Star had been the first theater in Ames. It was known as the Scenic when it was started in 1911. So this is pretty early on. And the Jabrats, you remember the Joe Jabrat name?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Okay.
Is
Well,
that
his-
actor? Or,
No, he was owned the theaters. It was somewhere around 1913, I think it was, that his father, I think it was his dad, came here from Carroll, Iowa, and bought the Twin Star, or bought the Scenic, and turned it over to his son Joe.
Now, were these silent films that were
These
played
were silent
there?
films,
I see.
entirely, yeah.
And it was 5 and 10 cents.
Right, and
It says Wurlitzer 20-piece electric orchestra, so that was what played in the background.
well, they could call it what it was, I would call it a glorified player piano.
Oh, I see.
And I can remember when the rolls would run out and the operator had to run from the back of the theater, well, they're going flap, 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 and he would change the roll.
Well, here's another ad for the theater, Twin
yeah.
Star, for your amusement.
Yeah, Twin Star.
And do you remember going there?
Oh, yes, on Saturday afternoon. You see, in 1915, I was just approaching my 5th birthday. And I suppose it was a little bit after that I would be with kids my age going to see Tom Mix and Fatty Arbuckle and people like that at the Saturday afternoon show. That was the Twin Star would be full of kids that age. You know.
Well, you know, we don't, of course, there was no TV, and in fact, we had live entertainment names at that time called Chautauqua.
That's right.
And we have some really interesting newspaper clips and the program of the Chautauqua. But as we finish up on the phone book here, look at the back cover. Here's another suit for $15. That's even less than the ad we saw before.
And you know where the Fair store was located?
Where was that?
It's right where YSS is
Oh,
now.
is that
In
right?
that building.
Wow.
In the downstairs.
Wow, well that was that's now the Lazy M downstairs.
Right.
Farwell, before we look at the Chautauqua program here, let's ask, are there other time capsules in downtown Ames or in the community that we can look forward to uncovering someday?
Well, there's one that I know about. It's on the southwest corner of Clark and Main Street. That's the Olson Building. It's built in, I believe, a 1911 time period.
And there's a time capsule
There's a
there.
time-
Do we know where it is in the building?
According to the story that was in the paper that itemized the things that were put there, it said it was in the northeast corner of the building, on the northeast corner.
What was the date?
Well, the date, the month and day I haven't got. I think it was, I'm going to put it that way because I want to be accurate, in 1911.
1911, so
Yeah.
that's a little bit older than this one.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, that's something to look forward to.
And one of the interesting things that they put in there is a sealed glass container of seeds.
Oh.
See, Olson was a
yeah,
producer of nursery and,
Yeah.
he had a large
In fact,
greenhouse.
I think there was an ad in the 1915 phone book.
Yeah. And that became the location for his retail store. And then, of course, they had that for those days, a quite large greenhouse out west of the campus.
Okay.
About
And they
where,
brought all their things in
and
downtown to sell.
Yeah, that's right. They shipped almost every 24 hours during the week. They shipped to Chicago and Omaha.
Oh,
Yeah.
all over the Midwest.
Yes, that's right.
Well, let's look at the Chautauqua program. Here it is for August 12th through the 19th, 1915, and that's when the cornerstone was laid in the 1915 Municipal Building, so I'm sure people were looking forward to this. And you open it, and here we see what the fairgrounds look like for Chautauqua. For those who don't know, briefly, what was this about?
Well, let me back up just a little bit. Chautauqua started in Ames in 1904, so we're about the 11th year for Chautauqua. And about 1909, they purchased 17 acres, which today is the north portion of the Ames Municipal Cemetery. So the Chautauqua Park, as we sometimes called it, officially it was known as the Maxwell Park because had been a part of the Maxwell family farm from about 9th Street up to 13th Street.
And this was a park that was specifically for this annual event?
It was purchased for the Chautauqua, as grounds for the Chautauqua program. And they operated there until 1927, I believe. And in 1912, they built a permanent auditorium out there.
Oh, okay. So they
that's the auditorium that later became the field house.
See, people can rent furniture for
Right.
their tents out there.
That's right.
And I bet you, is this Adams Funeral Home? In the old days, didn't funeral homes often, weren't they also furniture stores?
That's right. And M.J. Adams, that would be the grandfather of present-day Terry Adams, was operating the furniture store and the funeral operation.
Now, I guess what the program features are the different entertainers that came to Ames for this event. Is that right?
That's right. They featured educators, political speakers, musicians, musical groups, even magicians and special entertainers for children. And almost every year there was a special day for children.
This group looks like they're dressed up in Civil War outfits.
In fact, there were several Ames people that were on the Chautauqua circuits in those years.
And went around to different cities and spoke.
Right, yeah.
Here are some of the lecturers, I guess.
That's right. And now these people varied from political people to educators. Different years. I don't remember who was here in 1915, but you'll find that they fall into those categories usually. And was that an MD up there in the?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And did you attend this Chautauqua in 1915?
Well, I tell you, in 1915, if I did, it was because my grandfather let me take a nap in his tent. He always had the family tent out there, as it did 40, anywhere from 40 to 80, 90 families, varying from year to year.
I guess these would come on one after another.
Yeah. You see, now there's entertaining groups and individuals. They were very well attended in those years.
Why did they go out of fashion? Was it because we had other forms of entertainment?
Yes, exactly. Other forms of entertainment. It was summed up by one writer who said that Chautauqua was run over by a Model T Ford on the way to the movies on a newly paved road. They say you take these three factors and you see what happened to the...
Well, look at this Farwell. You can see very clearly how much they had scheduled back to back.
Yeah.
All through.
And it was a high class and strictly a family program.
It must have been a lot of fun.
It
I'm sure
was.
you have very fond memories, and a few other people in Ames who might have attended, either here or in other communities.
Right. Shorty Soletter, do you know him?
No, I don't.
His wife, who died some years ago, was a musician. She sang very beautifully. She was a soprano. And she and a group of 4 others were on the Chautauqua circuit from Ames.
And they went to other communities.
They went one year they appeared on I believe it was over 50 Chautauqua programs.
Wow.
In the Midwest.
Well, this is really fun to look through, and of course this is available at the Ames Public Library.
Yeah.
And I think it would make a great project for a young person to research out and kind of give their classmates and their teacher an education about this part of our history.
Right.
It's fascinating.
There's an orchestra there, for example. There was a band that operated under the name of the director, but he called it the Chautauqua Band, and they traveled the Midwest.
Well, actually, if we look now at the Ames Evening Times, and is that the same as the Ames
No,
Tribune?
No, we had two papers at that time. The Ames Tribune that we saw a little while ago, it started out as under the name of the Intelligencer, way back in 1868. And in 1911, I think it was, Williams, owner and editor, changed the name to Tribune.
Oh, okay.
And then in 1892, a man by the name of Lawton, I can't say his name now, I'll think of it in a minute, came to Ames. He was an experienced editor, and he started the Ames Evening Times in 1892. And that became a daily. I think it was a daily even before the Tribune was. And in 1919, which would be just 4 years after this occasion, those two papers merged.
Okay,
Yeah.
to become the Ames Tribune.
Right.
Well, here's the Chautauqua program right on the front page. Obviously, people were very excited. And I notice here toward the bottom of the page is an article about our new jail. And it says, new jail will be strong one. Window bars are being set.
Right.
So right then and there, this was, at the time that, and of course this paper is from the time capsule, at the time that they were laying the foundation for the new building, the 1915 Municipal Building. Isn't it fun to kind of look at these old newspapers and follow the construction?
Right.
Well, let's see what else is in the newspaper from 1915, and I think it's more about the Chautauqua.
Here, of course, it tells the plans to lay the cornerstone
yes.
itself.
Oh, yeah.
Gives the
Monday
hours.
at 2:30. I bet that's why they
tells
picked
about
this.
the parade. I guess I shouldn't stick my hand in.
Well, we'll see if we can take a closer look at this and read it. Yes.
Here.
Hey,
2:30.
Ames Women's Club. Yes, it has also they have right here in the time capsule the Ames Women's Club of 1915, which was when it was founded.
That's right.
Has the minutes of their first meeting.
That's right.
And if you notice here, and of course we still have the Ames Women's Club in Ames today. If you read a little further down, you'll see some of the committee members who worked on the municipal building. Isn't it great that the community of Ames has decided to restore this building and it'll continue, because that building was built to last Farwell. I mean, the outside walls of the municipal building are about 18 inches thick.
Yeah.
As you know, at one time, that 1970, I think that building was bombed during demonstrations and no damage done. It's a very strong building.
Right. Well, that was a forecast of that, wasn't it?
Yes.
Notice all of the groups and interests in the city that were involved in that. The representatives of the business and professional interests will march in groups with appropriate banners, and the following group chairmen have been appointed to see that all persons interested are invited to march in the parade. Somewhere I've seen a picture of that in print. It doesn't seem to be. I haven't seen it.
I am sure that's why they put this in the time capsule, so back into the future where we are now, we could read all about it.
Yeah.
Here's some of the ads in the newspaper. Go back and take a look. Here's the Central Iowa Fair. Now that's not the same as Chautauqua, is it?
That's not the same as Chautauqua. However, it usually followed the Chautauqua.
Okay, and it does follow.
And it
in
was a
September.
working relationship because the main part of the fairgrounds, the agricultural part, was down below on the lowlands.
I
See,
see.
they had their farm buildings, they had their livestock buildings down there, but they used the same auditorium.
Oh.
For
As,
the fair-
as
for the-
Chautauqua.
Yeah.
So it got a double use.
We had a Central Iowa Fair. Sometime it was also part of the time was known as the Tri-County Fair.
Okay. And that, so there was quite a bit of entertainment.
That's right.
And it was all live except for the TriStar Theater.
Yeah.
Classified ads. Here are rooms to rent and for sale. Very interesting to take a look into the past.
Yeah. Right. Furnished house, September 1st.
And then here's a little bit more about Chautauqua.
Right.
So it consumed a lot of the newspaper.
Ames Band will open assembly. Almost every year the Ames Band appeared on the Chautauqua program.
Well, now we'll take a look at some other interesting items from the time capsule. And here's a death notice. And it's the only death notice we have in the time capsule. And it must have been a very important person.
Okay, that was David Maxwell, and David Maxwell was Dr. Maxwell's father. Dr. Maxwell, that we referred to before, A.B. Maxwell, was the longtime city clerk, and was city clerk at the time of the putting these things into the into the capsule. Now, Dr. Maxwell, okay. As I indicated earlier, talking about A.B. Maxwell, his father owned the Ames Hotel, the one that earlier had been known as the West House.
Yes.
It stood where the on the southwest corner of 5th Street and Douglas.
So it must have been a very well-known family.
That's right, and they lived on Kellogg, just within a block of where I lived, and the next generation were classmates of mine, you see.
Now here we mentioned a little earlier the history of the Ames Women's Club, and in the 1915 time capsule there were a lot of items that were actually handwritten, and these actually, with a little preservation, they are very precious items and easy to read. And here you have the history of the Ames Women's Club, August 7th, 1915, and it talks about their first meeting, and then it starts to list all of the women who were the founding members. And of course, back then, women did not have the vote, and I'm sure many of their discussions involved obtaining the right to vote. Here we see some of the names. Do any of them that you recognize?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right. And you notice that the married women all used the initials, their husband's initials.
Rather than their own first name.
Mrs. Grace Hulse is an exception there. There are exceptions.
Here's lots of others. Yes, all of them are just as you said, their husband's initials.
Yeah. And
Here's one.
Miss Etta Budd.
Oh, yes. I know that name because
yeah.
Youth and Shelter Services has 20 kids living at the Budd Mansion, which is at 804 Kellogg, formerly the Budd House. And Etta Budd was an artist, and I think she's also known to have had the first Model T car in Ames, or one of the first women drivers, and she is the one who interested George Washington Carver in coming to Iowa State University.
Right. And there's Mrs. C.F. Curtis. Her husband was the Dean of Agriculture.
Yes, and so she was in the Ames Women's Club. Isn't this fun to read?
And there was that Miss Jane Allen, I should say, the
yes.
daughter of the Allen we saw this morning.
Yes, Dr.
Or we saw earlier.
Oh, there's another Miss Etta Budd. Oh, now we saw Mrs. Budd. This is now Etta Budd.
Well, okay.
Yeah, see, this is Miss, and the other was Mrs.
Well, was there?
Take a look. Go back.
There's
there.
Curtis.
Yeah, there.
That's Miss.
It is Miss. Oh, she's down there
She
twice.
got herself down there.
Well, she was a assertive woman. Well, now there's the daughters of the DAR. Maybe a lot of people don't know what the DAR are. And there's the name Mrs. Harden.
Yes, Mrs. Harden.
Must have been her book.
Yes, Etta. Well, I'll tell you, her husband was the editor and the proprietor of the Ames Evening Times.
Okay.
And when he died, she took over the running of the paper for several years.
Well, good for her.
And then she gave that up, and it ended up being merged with the Tribune. Okay.
Were the Daughters of the American Revolution a very active club or organization?
Yes, very, very much so. And Mrs. Harden, for example, in her later years lived on the northeast corner of 9th and Douglas. And I think one of your YSS people live there.
That's right. That's right. And we're there too. Well, look at this. This is then their officers. And see if we recognize any of these.
These are state officers.
Oh, the state.
Then the officers of the national, and down here the chapter. Mrs. Clyde Williams, her husband was the football coach at Iowa State.
Yes, Clyde Williams Field.
Named after him. And Mrs. J.A. Warner, I think her husband was in the agronomy department. Miss Jane Allen was the daughter of the Allen and the Ames Building alone. And Mrs. Goebel, her husband was a professor of English. Miss Kellogg, I don't know. Mrs. A.H. Person, her husband was they were retired farmers by that time, living in Ames. And Miss Minnie Rice was working in one of the offices on campus.
And what did the DAR do?
Well, they promoted programs for history, preserving history. They were Daughters of the American Revolution, as you indicated. I don't know that I can recite their stated purpose, but it was patriotic.
Did they work for the women to gain the vote?
Specifically, I don't know. I would have to think some of them did.
Well, this is a interesting booklet to look through. It tells about some of their events, their programs. I guess they raised money for different things.
Right.
And they were the Sundial chapter here in Ames, Iowa.
That's right. And for many years there was a sundial on a pedestal by the library that the DAR had
Oh, is that right?
Provided.
It's too bad that wasn't preserved.
Yeah. I don't know what became of that.
So this is the...
there are lots of those women. If we go through that list, and you'll recognize many, many names of people on the faculty and in business and Ames, you know.
Well, now let's turn to a men's club, a club that many people probably have not heard of, and this is the Mono Clan, Farwell, and here are some of the members. I think it's interesting. They had their membership list right here in the 1915 time capsule, and we're looking at items from the 1915 time capsule that was uncovered at the in the municipal building in the process of converting it and remodeling it into the new Youth and Family Center. What was the Mono Club?
Well, first of all, it was a group that was organized by and for young businessmen, largely local businessmen. I sometimes have described it as similar to the Junior Chamber of Commerce of today.
Okay.
It was organized in the latter part of 1906.
And where did these gentlemen meet?
Where did they meet?
Yes, where was their
Well,
gathering?
they first met on the top floor of what we knew in recent years as the Ames Hotel. It was torn down just a few years ago. There was a dentist, Dr. Hunt, lived and owned that house and had his dental office on the first floor. And he was sort of helped promote the group, and they had the use of the third floor.
And didn't they also meet at the Ames Tribune?
Later on, yes. They, as a matter of fact, this group operated and they became incorporated in a few years later. You'll find all the businessmen. You'll find Clay Stafford's name on there when he was a young man.
What does at the top here? What does mono mean?
Well, they were interested in singing, and they did a lot of singing in late hours, and they were called night owls at first, and they took the name of the Mysterious Order of Night Owls.
Sounds like a fun group.
It was a fun group. They had some interesting provisos, among other things. Their bylaws provided there would be no alcohol and no gambling in their club rooms.
Oh.
Later on, they had their club rooms, as you indicated, in the upper floor of the Tribune building. This was after John Powers built the building in about, 1928 or 9. They existed until 1974.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had never heard of them until we saw these items.
I
from
had
the
cousins
time
that belonged
capsules.
to it.
Now here we have the Scottish Rite newsletter. Were they a big organization?
Well,
in Ames,
Scottish
Iowa?
Rite is one of the rites within the, I think of it anyway, within the Masonic order, related to it closely. This Scottish Rite group was actually headquartered in Des Moines, but they had an Ames group. You saw the pictures there. I could tell you some of the people. But they have a York Rite and a Scottish Rite. I can't tell you too much about the difference.
Here they have all the towns that they're in. Look at that long list over
right.
there. Obviously, it was a big organization.
Right.
Were you?
Go back to the picture a second.
Okay.
And
Here we are.
the man in the middle there again is Mr. Allen that we saw.
Now you didn't. It didn't necessarily mean you were of Scottish ancestry,
No,
did it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And the man in the top center was Valentine, E.W. Valentine, who owned the fair store that occupied the building that you're in.
Well, obviously, clubs, organizations, women's. Fortunately, the women had their new club. Were very important social outlets for our community back
And
in
there's A.B.
1915.
Maxwell,
Yes.
city clerk.
Boy, he shows up a lot.
Yeah.
Here we have an envelope. This is just a mailing envelope for the Ames Commercial Club. And I think that now is the Ames Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, it preceded the Ames Chamber of Commerce. I think
And this,
legally they're separate organizations, but they changed. There was a name change.
Farwell, look at the back of the envelope. And I guess this is how they wanted to advertise Ames, Iowa.
Yep. Ames advertises America.
Yep, that was.
Iowa State College, home of.
Yeah, I didn't.
Ideal home city.
Mhm.
City of the Corn Belt.
And there's our.
Continental Auto Route and the CNNW main line.
That was the main street.
And there's a little suburb there off to the south known as Des Moines. See that?
I see it, yes. Here we go. There's Des Moines.
And Kansas City and Twin Cities are,
Way down here.
yeah, they're just sort of off the map. Fort Dodge.
44 passenger trains, 32 freight trains. Well, there are no passenger trains today, and certainly many more than 32 freight trains coming through Ames.
Well, I'll tell you, when the total reached that level, that included interurbans. The passenger trains, yes. And Ames had more passenger cars going into and out of Ames per 24 hours than Des Moines, Iowa did at that time.
Wow. No, I didn't know that. You know, we're have so many more items we could show, and I think this will have to be our last item, unfortunately, Farwell. And again, to remind the viewers that if you want to take a closer look at these items from the time capsule, Farwell, as our town historian, has done a complete inventory of the items in the 1915 time capsule, and they're all on at the Ames Public Library, and you can take a closer look. Some of the items you're not really going to be able to leaf through as we have here, but there are Xerox copies so that you
Right.
can take a closer look. Here's the official report of the Department of Finance and Municipal Counts in Ames, Iowa.
There's
And so
that
they
A.B.
put that in
Maxwell
there.
name down
Boy,
there again.
yes. He kept track of all the money, too.
Yeah.
And so with this, and it's fascinating to look through all these city documents. There's also a plat of the city of Ames we haven't gotten to. We invite all of you to celebrate Ames's history. And the people, our predecessors, our founding fathers in the city of Ames have done a wonderful job of putting this time capsule together. And maybe in a future show we'll be able to talk about the items in the new time capsule that's being put together to be placed in the same building. Farwell, thank you for joining us for this and sharing your vast knowledge of the history of Ames. We could go on and on. It's been a real pleasure listening to you reminisce about our past.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be with you today. I've enjoyed it.